Hey students, this video is sort of a overview of some important sort of facts about Buddhist art. So we were here on this slide in the last video. I think I'll go through it. We talked about how Buddhism has evolved and it's interpreted differently by different people in different places, and how Buddhas in different places can look very different. I think this Buddha on the right in this slide is outside of Tokyo. I had the name of that Buddha, the Kamakura Buddha outside of Tokyo. And then the Buddha on the left is in China. So you can see how differently these Buddhas may look depending on where they're made and displayed. We already talked about Buddhism being flexible. We talked about the discussion forum. I'm going to probably refer back to this slide a little later, but just so you can kind of picture it in your mind, Buddhism started in India, but it spread to Afghanistan, Tibet, Thailand, Burma, all these different places, Indonesia, Malaysia. So it spread very widely, and we're going to talk about how that happened today. So let's see. I want to remember what I was saying about these things. So Buddhism, some of this Buddhist art that we're going to be talking about today, was created around or just after Shakyamuni Buddha died, which was about 563 BC. So we're working, that's before the Common Era, BCE. So our numbers are going to go down as the time gets more recent. But it was about some of this Buddhist art was created around the same time as the Parthenon in Greece. So that just might give you a little context. The historical Buddha is sometimes referred to as Siddhartha Gautama. He believed in the middle path. The great appeal of Buddhism is its teaching of wisdom, compassion, and humility. Its emphasis on moral and ethical perfection. It had a democratic outlook and promoted a casteless society, and that widened its attraction. So you might think back to where else have we heard of castes and classes of people. You might remember at the beginning of this course, we were talking about feudalism and how if somebody was born a serf in Europe, in Great Britain, in the Middle Ages, there was no movement. They couldn't move out of that class. In India, when the Buddha lived, the dominant religion was Hinduism, and there was a similar kind of caste system in Hinduism. You were born into a particular caste, and the belief was you couldn't change, you couldn't be in a different caste. And so just as in the Age of Reason, people started to believe they could move out of social classes, and people did move out of social classes into others. Buddhism offered the opportunity to expect practitioners to progress spiritually, and there was no belief that you were fixed in a caste. So those two kind of movements, from feudalism to the Enlightenment project, from Hinduism, though certainly there are plenty of people who are still practitioners of Hinduism in the world. But part of the appeal for people who embraced Buddhism was this idea that they could progress spiritually and move out of their caste. And so, though these two things happened at, centuries apart, they're similar in that way. All right. A Buddha is a being that has achieved enlightenment and has been released from samsara, which is the cycle of birth, suffering, illness, and death. We already talked about the Four Noble Truths. All right, so now I'm getting into Buddhist art. And in looking at Buddhist art, I learned this word that I never knew before. It's a good word to know. You can throw it around at a cocktail party and everybody will know you've been to college. Aniconic Buddhist art. So an icon, as we all know, is a representational figure. So often, the Buddha statues we just were looking at, those are iconic Buddhist art. But before these figures of the Buddha were common, the first Buddhist art, and we don't know why this is, but this is the case, was what they call aniconic, which means art that does not represent the icon of the Buddha. I'm going to move my little window so I can see a little better here. So the Buddha, who lived from, I think I gave his death date as his birth date. He lived from 563 to 483 BC. He was not depicted in human form for some 400 years after his death, and nobody knows why that is, but that's the case. He was represented instead by various symbols like a wheel, a shrine, a tree, and footprints adorned with the marks of his divine nature. These footprints became a popular symbol across the Buddhist world for his earthly presence and continued to be made and revered after images of him became widespread. And if you want to read more about sort of aniconic Buddhist art, you can click on that link there. It's an article from the New York Times. One of the most important figures in sort of the history of Buddhism is this guy, King Ashoka, who lived in India in the 3rd century BCE. And he was very interested in Buddhism. He had been involved in a lot of wars, and what appealed to him in Buddhism was the pacifism, the peacefulness. And so he has a lot of money and a lot of resources. And he decides that his real mission is to convert people to Buddhism. He really believes in it, and he wants to spread the word about Buddhism. And since he has a lot of money, he has a lot of ways he can do that. Let me see what else I wanted to remember to tell you about him. So the way he spreads the word about Buddhism is through art, because of course, it wasn't pamphlets or whatever. It was these big pieces of art. So he becomes a patron of this religion and of artists. And he wants to spread Buddhism around. He wants to convert people to Buddhism. And he uses art to let people know about the beauty of Buddhism. And one type of Buddhist art he spreads around and finances are these pillars. And so you can see these Ashokan pillar and lion capital from the Maurya period around 250 BCE. The height of this capital of this lion at the top is about 7 feet. So this is big. You can see that person there. So you can see how big these pillars are. They're like posts that have writings about what's great about Buddhism. They have lots of symbols, such as lions, lotus flowers, wheels. We see these again and again in Buddhist art, and we'll talk about what they mean. Lions often represent kings. You see this, in fact, in Europe too, at like Versailles. And a lot of references to the number 4 for a lot of different reasons. So lions often suggested royalty. We often see horses, oxen, elephants. A lot of repetition of the number 4, which can refer to the 4 directions or to the concept of samsara, the beginningless cycle of birth, mundane existence, and dying again, which is often represented by 4 stages: birth, life, decay, and death. So those are things we often see in these pillars. Another kind of really common Buddhist art are stupas, S-T-U-P-A-S, and they are actually big mounds of dirt. They can hold the remains, part of the Buddha's remains, or maybe an artifact like a cup the Buddha drank from or something. They're sort of markers, has been sort of a marker for travelers, and they're stupas are built to say the Buddha was here. This is a precious, this holds something precious, either part of the Buddha's remains or something he touched, something he used. There are mounds of dirt around that object. And they were placed around trade routes. So remember, King Ashoka wants to expose people to Buddhism, and so he was very savvy. He built these stupas, he built these pillars in places where people were traveling, so that they wouldn't miss them. And so the greatest number of people possible would see these messages about Buddhism and these images about Buddhism. And then maybe I'll go back to that map now and just say, so they have found pillars and stupas in places and Buddhas in places like Afghanistan, Tibet, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, India. So a really wide, they were spread widely over trade routes. So people traveling between those places were exposed to them. I think I just went too far. So we were looking at stupas here that you can see are kind of primitive, not very fancy, but they can also be more intricate like this one. And the thing about stupas is you don't go inside them, you walk around them. And the act of walking around a stupa is seen as kind of a meditative act. So it's a way of sort of meditating on your spiritual path, on the Buddha's life, on how to escape the wheel of samsara. More 4s and circles. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but the idea is that basically a stupa is like a wheel or a circle. The unmoving center symbolizes enlightenment. The practitioner achieves stillness and peace when the Buddhist Dharma is fully understood. A lot of stupas are square, and the 4 sides represent the 4 directions: north, south, east, and west. Each side often has a gate in the center, which allows the practitioner to enter from any side. I'm going to let you read the rest of that. Yeah, the gates guide the practitioner in the correct direction on the correct path to enlightenment, the understanding of the 4 noble truths. I already mentioned you don't enter the stupa, you walk around it as a meditational practice. The movement suggests the endless cycle of rebirth and the spokes of the Eightfold Path, 8 guidelines that assist the practitioner, that leads to knowledge of the 4 noble truths and into the center of the unmoving hub of the wheel enlightenment. These are some more images from Buddhist art, again, lions. I've always really loved the image of the lotus on Buddhist art. The thing to know about the lotus flower is that it grows in mud. And I always find this a really powerful metaphor. The idea, you know, our daily lives can be tough. We've talked about how the Buddhists believe that, you know, there's a lot of suffering in life. But the lotus, so if you think of that suffering as like mud, the lotus thrives in mud. And that's sort of the ideal of Buddhist practice, that whatever we're handed, we thrive in it. We remain compassionate and humble. We do no harm. So out of sort of the suffering of life, the difficulty, the illness, the death, all the difficult things of life, if we practice diligently, we can become beautiful like the lotus flower. So there are a lot of lotus flowers in Buddhist art. These are details from a stupa, from another stupa in Sanchi. This is the interior of a cave in Anjanta around 460, which was built around 462, 500 BC. You can see another reason that Buddhism evolved and thrived was because you could practice it anywhere. There was no special place that was, you know, designed for Buddhism. We see all different kinds of Buddhist places of worship. And actually, it's pretty interesting in the United States. Buddhism has spread in the United States a lot in the last 100 years. And another way Buddhism is flexible is that many people who practice Buddhist meditation in the United States may actually follow another religious tradition. So there are rabbis who do Buddhist practices, there are Catholic priests who do Buddhist practices, there are obviously atheists who do Buddhist practices. So it doesn't exclude really any other belief system, except any belief system that would do harm, I guess. So I think I've said all this. Buddhism spread in part because it was not location specific. Here's another Buddha in a different pose. And we talked in the last video about the poses of Buddhas. And I may have mentioned that it's scholars of Buddhist art don't really know why in the beginning the Buddha was represented, you know, was not represented as a human figure, but by footsteps or by other symbols of the Buddha. And then at a certain point, he started to take sort of a human form and was represented that way. That's just a mystery. And these are, again, the different poses. These hand positions are called mudras. So these are some of the different hand positions you see. And if you look back at that link I gave you in the previous video that's in the PowerPoint, you can see sort of descriptions of each of these poses and what each of them mean. Here are a couple other Buddhas. One from in India, one in Pakistan. Here's one doing the earth touching gesture. Here's one turning the wheel of the law. Shakyamuni Buddha giving his first sermon. Another theme in Buddhist art is that of the Dharma wheel. So there are tons of circles, and you might remember the lotus is a circle, right? There are tons of circles. As we talked about earlier, when you go to a stupa, you don't go inside it, you go around it. And all of that is a reference to the Dharma wheel, which is usually depicted as a wheel with 8 spokes for the Eightfold Path. It's a symbol of Buddhism and of the Bodhidharma. Remember, Dharma just means the teaching, the truth is another way to interpret it. Turning the Dharma wheel or setting it in motion is a poetic way to describe the Buddha's teaching of the Dharma. The first turning began when the Buddha delivered his first sermon after his enlightenment. In this sermon, he explained the Four Noble Truths, which would be the foundation of all the teachings he gave in his life. And here's a really beautiful, I just love this one, really beautiful, iconic Buddha. And this is him giving the first sermon. It's in sandstone. You might want to watch this short video of art historians discussing different Buddhas. That might help you think about your discussion post for this week. I also wanted to mention, because this was sort of a significant and pretty tragic moment in Buddhist art. We had talked about how Buddhist art spread so widely, and there were some really beautiful Buddhas in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, here you can see what they looked like. They're sort of in these cliffs in Afghanistan, and they were obviously very treasured and sort of very famous in the art history world, and particularly in the world of Buddhist art. And unfortunately, in 2001, when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, they blew them up. They destroyed them. And it was sort of an ironic moment because Buddhism is such a peaceful religion. And we just talked about how flexible it is and how, you know, somebody who practices almost any religion can practice Buddhism. But it was a statement the Taliban seemed to want to make, and they got a lot of attention for it. And it was very, very tragic because they really had to work hard. It's not funny, I'm sad. But it's just, they really had to work hard to destroy this Buddha because you can see he's inside that cliff. So they really had to go in with dynamite and stuff to blow him up. And you can read a little bit about that here. The destruction took several weeks. There are fragments of them still. The Taliban's direction to destroy the Buddhist images was motivated in part by the group's extreme iconoclastic campaign, as well as their disdain for the fact that money from Western countries was being spent on protecting the images. So even though Buddhism is peaceful and takes no sides, that doesn't mean that Buddhist images can't be politicized, as they were in this case. All right, so those are just some points about Buddhist art I wanted to share with you, and hopefully to help you think about your discussion post this week. The next video will be about the second half of the book. Let me know if you have any questions.